HydraFacial was a brand that had been around for 25 years, not really well known. 5 years together, we really put that on the map, and really that became the category leader.
What are major shifts you have observed in how brands and audiences interact with creators?
When I started Evolve almost 11 years ago, I think it was more of a one-sided conversation where creators would post content and people would just watch it. And now people expect to have a relationship with that creator.
How do you think vetting influencers before a campaign goes live should be done? What's your philosophy at your agency?
It sort of depends on the campaign and the client. I think clients have different sort of risk tolerance levels. For instance, we will put items in the contract talking about like blackout periods, timing for our posts versus what they post personally.
That's very interesting.
I would love to see if there's a way to use AI to shorten the compliance review process. We have to go through medical, legal, regulatory review. And if we could have a tool in-house, I think that would be a game changer for pharma brands.
Right. I hope, our developers at Phyllo are listening to you right now and getting ideas about the next product.
If you can do it, we'll test it. I would love that.
This episode is brought to you by Phyllo, the universal solution for social media background checks and influencer vetting. If you work in background verification, brand reputation, image building, public relations, or influencer marketing, you know how crucial fast and reliable background screening is. With Phyllo Social Screening, you can run AI-powered social media background checks in just 15 minutes, spotting red flags, news mentions, and adverse media across platforms. Trusted by leaders like Global Background Screening, Gigan, Prembly, and Essential Screens, Phyllo Social Screening helps you save millions of dollars in crisis management. Check out the link in the description to book a demo today.
Hello everyone, this is Shubham Tiwari. I'm the Associate Director of Content Marketing and Socials at Phyllo, the universal solution for social media background checks and influencer vetting. And this is season 3. You have been watching all our episodes, so thank you so much. Today, we have a new episode and a new guest. Her name is Megan Driscoll. She's the CEO and founder of EvolveMKD, a fiercely independent communications agency that's redefining beauty, healthcare, wellness, PR. With over 2 decades in this business and countless award-winning campaigns under her belt, Megan isn't just leading a firm. She's, setting the new standards for authenticity, purpose, protection in this age of influencer-led storytelling. Today, we are diving deep into the DNA of EvolveMKD, the evolving PR landscape, the pressure of brand safety, and the science behind selecting creators to work on a particular campaign. Megan, welcome to Impulse.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start on fun note. What's one social media trend you wish to see disappear?
So I'm not a fan of the skin cycling trend on TikTok. I would very much like that to disappear. Actually, any skincare trend on TikTok, I would just like to not have happen. So.
Can you tell us about what skin cycling is? I have completely missed out on this trend, thankfully. So
basically, from my understanding, which I might not be cool enough to fully grasp it, but it's like when you're, that your skin apparently like cycles, like, so you need to like switch products every so often and like kind of keep things, keep your product like up to date with like wherever your skin is in its cycle. And the reason I don't like it is it's more indicative of like I mentioned, a larger issue with, I think, trends on skincare or trends on TikTok having to do with skincare are just based on nothing.
Yeah,
based on science so that's why I dislike it.
That's fair enough. You launched EvolveMKD at a time when integrated PR and influencer marketing weren't mainstream. What gap did you see in the market, and how did how did that shape agency's DNA?
I've always thought that PR agency should be the lead agency when it comes to the various channels. I think fundamentally, to be a successful PR agency, you have to tell a good story. And really, in all the channels, that remains true, right? Whether you're doing paid media, whether you're doing influencer, whether you're looking at your own social media or your website, it's all about what's your narrative and understanding the audience that you're talking to. And I fundamentally think that in order to have success in PR, that's basically the foundation. And so when I started EvolveMKD, I just started it with the idea that we were going to own all those channels eventually. So I started the agency with PR, and social media being a core offering. And then the next thing we expanded to was influencer.
Okay. So you had the sort of foresight about influencers becoming very important. Again, I generally do this at the end of the interview. But since, we can see you're, of course, a lot of people look up to you, you're an industry veteran. So now what do you see in the future in vis-a-vis influencer marketing or influencer vetting? Where do you see 10 years from now? What will happen?
Yeah, I think obviously we're going to have AI be a larger part of the process with influencer marketing, whether it's, sort of creating influencers that are based on machine modeling, or helping us identify influencers or vet the influencers. I think AI will probably also help us with some paid media, some programming, some things like that, like testing which algorithm works the best and all that. Where I see it going, we've seen a shift the last year or two. We're still doing the traditional influencers, the friends on TikTok, our friends on Instagram, but we've been getting a lot more requests and also using a lot more of the expert influencer. So whether that's, an OBGYN or a dermatologist, we're seeing that really from an online credibility standpoint, having influencers like that, we call them Phys-Influencers at Evolve, really help to credibly deliver a message. Whether you're dealing with a lot of our brands are, straddle healthcare and beauty, whether you're dealing with a brand like that, or even if you're dealing with like a fitness brand or something that's, more lifestyle, I think people want to know that they're actually getting advice from someone whose expertise is grounded in some kind of training and is more than just opinion. So I see that, more and more brands kind of shifting in that direction over the next few years.
That's very interesting. You call them fizz creators, right?
Yeah, fizz creators or fizz influencers. Yep.
That's very interesting. So you're saying essentially that more and more creators will become experts and they'll have, the industry will demand, more experts amongst the creators.
I think the industry will demand more expertise. So I think if you're already an influencer, I think really focusing in, an area that you feel like you are an expert in. And then on the flip side, I see more physicians, so more MDs, more healthcare professionals, increasing their footprint from real life to online.
That's very interesting. EvolveMKD has delivered some of the biggest, players in aesthetics and wellness, from L'Oreal to, HydraFacial and AstraZeneca. Mm-hmm. Was there a breakthrough campaign or moment that really put you on the industry's map? Can you tell us about that?
I would say, you mentioned it. I would say that our work with HydraFacial is really something that I think my team looks back on very fondly, and I think set the industry standard. HydraFacial was a brand that had been around for 25 years and really kind of was ignored and was sort of, just not really well known. And they brought in a whole new management team, and then that management team brought us on board. And over our 5 years together, we really put that on the map, and really that became the category leader. And I think what was so great about that as the agency working on it was we worked with a client team that wasn't afraid of failing. So we really were given the freedom to try and experiment and be really creative. And the worst that would happen was that we would all learn something. And I think when you work in a client relationship that way, the agency is able to really do its best work because you're able to think of some really crazy things and know you have the support of the management team, and that, the attitude is that like there is no failure, there's only learning. I think that was like a really special experience to have. And I feel like the team is always trying to recreate that with new clients we bring on board.
Can you tell us, like, briefly, what did you do with HydraFacial that worked for them?
We did a few different things. Public relations is at the core of every campaign that we do, but we built on top of that, and we did a lot of earned influencer, a lot of paid influencer, and we did an entire experiential tour. So it went from city to city and gave, local folks in each market, consumers as well as media influencers, an opportunity to try HydraFacial. And we were able to build a lot of conversation in the industry as well as like broadly to consumers. And I think what made that different is, at the time, they've been bought now, but they were owned by private equity, and we were only able to do these marketing efforts if they paid for themselves. So I think that's a little bit different, in terms of like what agencies
Right.
are held to. We had to make sure that we were basically self-funded. So there was always a sales component to everything we did, which sometimes made our job harder, but a lot of time forced us to be even more creative.
Wow. Creativity is like that. It requires some kind of boundary or constraint. That's when it comes
Yep.
out
The
alive.
creativity happens.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of evolution, influencer marketing has evolved rapidly in healthcare and beauty. What are major shifts you have observed in how brands and audiences interact with creators?
I think they expect more from creators. So I think now they expect more content. They expect the creators to really engage with them. They expect creators to answer their questions. So I think rather than when I started Evolve almost 11 years ago, I think it was more of a one-sided conversation where creators would post content and people would just watch it. And now I think, people expect to have a relationship with that creator, even if it's just a base level with them responding to their DMs. But I do think there's a higher standard to what they expect from a creator.
Right. So, are you saying that there is no such thing as more content nowadays? Like people want more and more. Is there a ceiling there?
I think as long as your content is authentic to you and it's not filler, I think, that's like the key. I think if you really have a lot to say and you're posting a ton and it's like very relevant and authentic to you, I think, your engaged audience, they'll go for that. But I think if you're just posting to hit like a quantity number, then that's when I think you like lose people.
Yeah, and also, of course, it depends on the category because I follow some journalists who have become creators now. Let's say, football journalist, he has or she has to tweet like 100 times a day, and people are just waiting to find what they're tweeting or creating a reel, anything. Evolve works in industries where public perception and scientific accuracy are critical. How do you balance storytelling with compliances when working with creators? Because creators, the mega creators, are often accused of, spreading misinformation, the likes of Joe Rogan, the likes of, the Hubermans of this world. So how do you handle that?
So it all starts with, I think, who you pick to work with. So I think there is, when you're working with an FDA regulated product, there are a list of rules that you have to follow, right? Whether we're putting out an advertising piece, whether it's influencer content. So I think it starts with making sure that your influencer understands that this is a different kind of partnership, right? That of course you always want it to be factual, but beyond the base level of it being factual, there's, a different level of rules that we have to abide by. And not everyone wants to create content in that way. And that's totally fine, right? This is a two-way street. So it only works if we can work together on this. Once we have that base level understanding and the influencer understands, sort of what's expected of them, we work really closely with them to storyboard out what it's going to look like, what we can include. And then we also have to work very closely with our clients, right? Because there is a happy medium between there's the rules you have to follow from a legal and regulatory perspective, but then there's like style.
Yeah.
Right. So it's also, again, making sure that we don't kill the creator's style so much to the point that the content just feels so inauthentic. And I think we've gotten to a good place with that, with, educating our clients, even before we're at the selection process about like what's realistic, showing them, when we put recommendations forward about creators to work with, having them understand, here are the pros and cons. Like this person is very tongue in cheek. They're very funny. Like you have to be like, okay with that. And helping the clients to feel comfortable that if they're not comfortable with someone's style, we don't choose that person. Because at the end of the day, it's not, no one's going to be happy then. So I think it's really important to make sure, it is a partnership. And between kind of the company, the influencer, and us. And I think sometimes people on all sides can lose track of that. So we always try to make sure we set these up from the beginning to be as successful as possible and make sure everyone understands what's expected of them.
Right. Of course, it's a partnership and it's very important to find the right partners. So it brings me to influencer vetting. So we are in an era, or I think we have gone past that era where the entire careers were cancelled because of some tweet made like
Hmm.
10 years back. But still, what do you think, how do you think influencer vetting influencers before a campaign goes live should be done? Do you go back like 5 years, 10 years, the content history, or something they might have deleted? So what's your philosophy at, your agency?
We do go back pretty far. It sort of depends on the campaign and the client. Because again, I think clients have different sort of risk tolerance levels. We generally rule out people, if there's anything about drugs or misogyny, like the foundational things. Like if someone's committed a crime, the basic things you would never want. I think where it gets a little sticky is around politics, because it's very hard to find a person in today's day and age who has not commented at some
or
point
or at least like
about
something.
politics.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
whether it's like the New York City mayoral win or the,
yeah, yeah,
whatever it is. Like some of these things
yeah,
are more benign than others, but we surface those to our clients as a point of discussion, because we always set the expectation that like in today's day and age, almost everyone will have something in their feed that comments about
yeah,
politics.
yeah,
So you have to be comfortable that after your partnership goes live, they may comment again.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we kind of look at that. We look at the tone. We look at like what people talked about, and we also have in contracts based on people's kind of comfort level, have put like blackout periods around if we know that our like campaign is going to go live during the State of the Union. For instance, we will, put some items in the contract talking about like blackout periods, like,
Yeah.
timing for our post versus what they post personally. So I think it's just very important to be very transparent. I mean, to your point, I think luckily we've moved out of the one tweet from 7 years
Yeah,
ago,
yeah,
it's going to get you
yeah,
canceled moment in
yeah,
time. But I still think for brands, you just need to go in eyes wide open, because now, like every week, something happens
yeah,
that's totally crazy. So the chance that your influencer is going to comment on something
yeah.
like is probably high. So we like to try to prepare our clients for the kinds of things they might comment on, what they might say, what their political leanings are. And then again, once, we picked someone, having an open conversation with that influencer,
Hmm.
because they want the brand partnership to go well too. Right.
Yeah,
So just being, again, very transparent and very, direct with everyone involved from the beginning.
right. I always wondered this. What happens when a campaign goes south? Let's say the Bud Light, major backlash, or Jaguar, for example.
Hmm.
So what happens in that case? What happens to the agency? I mean, we all know what happens to the creator. They get trolled, or whatever, very bad treatment from the public. But the agency remains behind the curtain. So what
Hmm.
happens to the agency when a campaign goes really badly?
And we've been fortunate. We haven't had a campaign go badly in like
Very
the
badly.
public sphere, but we've had creators we've had to end contracts with early.
Okay.
And that's because of commentary on, political
Politics.
happenings
Yeah.
that are more than opinion, or like derogatory towards like one group or another. So typically what we've done in those situations is once we're working with an influencer, we're always monitoring their content. We're just keeping an eye on things. We usually flag it to the client like immediately. And in the case I'm talking about, we flagged it to the client and we actually recommended ending the
Terminating.
partnership,
Okay. Hmm.
just because, again, nothing had happened, but you could see
Yeah.
maybe in a few weeks something could happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and they agreed, and we ended up fully paying the influencer, and we just said that like our goals had changed, it had shifted, and that we didn't burn any bridges, because everyone has the right to their own opinion. It's just companies also have a right to not
Work with them. Yeah.
want to engage with that too. So
Correct.
for that brand at that time, that was the best kind of,
Got it.
way out of it.
So, see, I'm sure you work with hundreds and if not thousands of creators at Evolve, or have worked with
Hmm.
so many. So how do you keep tab of every creator? What tools are you using to vet these potential disasters or backlashes? Essentially, for influencer vetting, what tools you're using?
We use a bunch of different tools. We use Tagger. We also use Phocard. Gosh, we have so many. We also have a pretty fine-tuned process that we organize via Airtable that shows like every influencer we've ever contracted with, the results of their, campaign, what worked, what didn't work. So we have our own like database that we're always like pulling from. We do a lot of manual vetting as well. Just once we get down to a smaller universe, just to make sure there's like nothing the tools haven't picked up. And then we actually just built for Evolve kind of a chat GPT like tool. That's AI. So we're going to start right now. We've been really applying that to some of our like our award entries and things like that. But we are going to start potentially using that with some of our influencer work as well.
Yeah, which brings me to something that I used in the introduction, the fiercely part, fiercely independent agency. What do you mean by, Evolve MKD being a fiercely independent agency?
I think I've worked at all different kinds of agencies, big, small, holding companies, not holding companies. And we're fiercely independent because we want to do things the right way. And, whether that's the tools we work with, whether that's the influencers we work with, whether that's even the clients we work with. And I think, that's what we mean by fiercely independent is just we want to do our work to a certain level and we want to have kind of partners on all fronts that share that philosophy.
Wonderful. And since you mentioned that, you used so many tools for influencer vetting at Evolve, we at Phyllo have been, also ensuring brand safety and brand values are aligned with creators through our social media screening tool, which enables, of course, real-time background checks. So how valuable do you think these real-time AI-based tools are in protecting a brand's reputation, since you're also building something in-house right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tools are really useful. I do think maybe I'm old school, but I've always thought that the winning combination is tools and human expertise combined. I think that the tool can help a lot of that like grunt work, right? And I think it can shorten like the time horizon it takes to do certain things like vetting, for instance, right? Like that can be, if you do it all manually, it can be incredibly crazy and take days and like a lot of people. And that's not efficient and that's not cost effective for clients. But I think when you combine that initial kind of run through a tool and then have a strategic human mind looking at it, there might be nuances in certain content that like the tool wouldn't pick up, but like me as a human looking at it would be like, I don't know if our client would love that. Right. So, I think really it's like you need both. And I've always thought that way about AI. Someone asked me years ago if I was worried if AI was going to like put me out of business. And I was like, no. I was like, it's going to be delightful because I'm going to free up brain space. To actually think about the hard questions and have a tool that can kind of do that first go at it or organize the information or give me like a synopsis. So then I can really be focused on the strategy and like the human part of it and like the personalities that you have to deal with on the client side and factor all that in, and the work product will probably get 10 times better.
Absolutely. And speaking of, this grunt work being given to AI. So Megan, what does your, day look like? Do you just get involved with your top clients, or the clients have to be of, certain size for Megan to be there? So what does your day look like?
So I always think this is funny. One of the reasons I got into agency life is because I like that there is no answer to what does your day look like, that every day is so different that there's no typical answer. And, I've kept my agency. I love working with clients. That is honestly like nothing makes me happier than when a client treats us like an extension of their team. I'm a former college athlete, so I love being on a team. Okay. I love like getting a sneak peek into all these different companies and businesses and seeing like, especially as a business owner, seeing like mistakes people make or triumphs they have. I feel like I learn a lot. So for me, it's not about the size of the account for me getting involved. It's more about, can I add something to it? I joke with my team that my number one job is to make myself irrelevant, because nothing makes me happier when a client says they don't need me because the team is so great. So it's really more about like, can I add something? And if I can, then the great thing about being an independent agency is that I don't have to have like financial requirements to be involved. I just get to decide. So yeah, it's a mix.
That's a great answer. How many people are there at EvolveMKD right now? What's the team size?
We're at 29.
29 people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And one more thing we try to do in this podcast is to give certain numbers to the people who are listening. So if you're comfortable, if the numbers are in public or you want to give us a number, what does an agency of Evolve size is, like a 29 member team, how much impact they're creating in terms of dollar value?
Yeah, so it ranges. I would say like the last few years in total revenue, so fees and pass through together, we've ranged from between 13 million to 17 million in total revenue. Okay. We grew, I started in 2014 and we've grown pretty significantly each year. We've had 2 years out of the 11 that have been flat or down, but that's not bad. Two out of 11 isn't bad. So.
Okay, were those COVID years, the flat years?
Actually, no. So our 2024 was our best year ever, and then 2020 was actually our second best year ever. But it didn't look like it was going to be that way. So okay. I still remember there was that like the end of March and April of 2020, I had there was a morning at the end of March where I had $3 million just like walk out of the agency because of COVID. So it did not look in April of 2020, like that was how we were trending. So I'm like so grateful. There were moments in March and April in 2020 where I was like, oh, this is how businesses fail. It's through like bad luck.
Yeah. So. Yeah. We hope 2025 becomes, better than 2024.
Yeah, me too. I'm hoping. Ever since COVID, every year is a new adventure. So we'll see.
Agency life.
Agency life. So that's, if I didn't want it to be an exciting day to day or year, I would have chosen a different career. So
nice. Let's get a bit technical. From creator onboarding to campaign rollout, what does a typical influencer marketing workflow looks like at Evolve?
Yeah, so we have our marketing workflow, we call it Impact. So we go through a few key steps, and this is like regardless of what kind of company you are, how big the budget, everyone follows kind of the same workflow. We start with identifying. So identifying, like I talked about, kind of key influencer categories. So who do we want to reach? What's their audience look like? Sometimes, which I'm sure sometimes influencers with the largest audience aren't necessarily the right choice for you. Sometimes you want like a more targeted audience. Then we look at kind of mapping those unique story angles. So we think about, okay, once we have the category of influencer we're looking at, what are the stories we want to tell? And how do those angles fit with this category? Do they match? Will we be able to have like clear creative alignment? Will it be authentic? Then we precisely select influencers. So what I was talking about earlier, we look at a very detailed casting brief. We prioritize like the key metrics, and then we talk about that with our brand partners, right? So telling them there's no perfect selection. So telling them, okay, here's our recommendations. Here are the trade-offs we're making with each person. Like I talked about before, if there's like a political nuance that we want to discuss, we want to have that during those periods. Then, once we've selected the influencers, we work with them on that storyboarding process. We will also, while we're doing that storyboarding, talk about amplifying with paid media. So I think that's really important, that you're not only focused on the content development, but in a parallel path, you're thinking about, okay, how am I amplifying this to a larger audience? And then, throughout the partnership, we're always thinking long term. So, just like clients, like I don't want any relationship to be one and done. I want to build trust with these influencers. So we want to cultivate those authentic relationships, because you never know. It might be, we might want to come back to them with a second partnership for the same client. Or we always want everyone to have a positive feeling about our brands and about Evolve. And then most importantly, track, optimizing, and report. So making sure that we're reporting on the metrics, reporting on the KPIs that we've set. And as we're running that paid media, making sure we're optimizing it in real time.
Wonderful. Megan, as you gave us the overview of the workflow, if there is one tool or solution existing or, in the process, or let's call them imaginary, that could make your job, significantly easier or solve a persistent problem or pain point at Evolve, what would it be?
So beyond mind reading, which I would love to develop the ability to do that with clients, I would say, I said this at a team meeting, and it's true for influencer, but it's also true for other parts of the work that we focus on. I would love to see if there's a way to use AI to shorten the compliance review process. So,
Okay.
a lot of the brands we work through, we have to go through medical, legal, regulatory review. And if we could have a tool in-house where we've trained it on our like compliant messages, our ISI, our approved like labeling from the FDA, and actually run the content, whether it's influencer, whether it's paid, whether it's like a media pitch or fact sheet, run it through that first before
Okay.
it gets submitted to shorten the time period from like content creation to content approved and go live. I think that would be a game changer, because I think for pharma brands right now, you can't take advantage of like pop culture moments in real time
That's
because
true.
of how
Yeah.
long that approval
You miss
process
out of them.
takes. And I think
Exactly.
if we could crack that nut, that would be like life changing, and frankly would help patients be more educated too,
Yeah,
because we'd be
definitely.
able to really respond to trends that aren't true, or we really be able to like be in those like of the moment conversations.
Right. I hope, our developers at Phyllo are listening to you right now and getting ideas about the next product.
If you can do it, we'll test it. I would love that. So
Great. Megan, a couple of rituals that we make our guests go through. Would you like to give us a book recommendation? It can be your all-time favorite book or something you're reading currently, or any author you want to give a shout out to.
So my all-time favorite book is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn,
Tree Grows in
which
Brooklyn.
A
Okay.
Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I read it a million years ago, and it's about a young woman, like turn of the century, like
Mhm.
early 1900s, and it follows her life. And I was born in Brooklyn, so it
Oh,
was just
wow.
really
Okay.
interesting as someone who was born in Brooklyn, and then also a young woman. She works, she does a lot of things at the time that women didn't do. So,
Yeah.
as an original Brooklynite and as a female entrepreneur, I've always just loved that book.
It's wonderful. We will definitely, check the book out and try to put a link in the description also. We try to collect, a lot of book suggestions from our guests. Last thing, would you like to nominate someone like you for our show?
Oh, wow.
And by that, I mean somebody who's working in, of course, PR and influencer marketing at the juncture of the two, or maybe building
Yeah,
something.
you know what? There is another woman. She owns an agency in California, Candace. She owns Spotlight Communications. I can make an introduction to you. She
Wonderful.
is fantastic. And we kind of have worked in parallel our whole careers. So it would be great if you could talk. I bet she has a different perspective on some of these things that you would find very interesting.
Definitely, we would love to host Candace. But for now, thank you so much, Megan, for your time and giving us such great insights. I'm sure people are looking up to you in the industry. I particularly am, because, what you said about the future of influencer marketing, people becoming, the Fizz creators. I love that. Looking forward to that. So thank you for your time, and thanks to our audience for sticking with us. Let us know what you thought of this episode. Comment in the YouTube comment section. If you're listening to us on Spotify, you can, get in touch from there as well. You can follow Megan on LinkedIn. We are going to put her profile's link as well in the description. Check out Evolve if you want to work with them. And in the meantime, stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Impulse, the influencer marketing podcast, is brought to you by Phyllo. Phyllo is the easiest way to get access to authenticated creator data from hundreds of different platforms. To know more about Phyllo, visit getphyllo.com. That's get, PHYLLO.com. Also, make sure to search for Influencer Marketing Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube Podcasts. And don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Phyllo, thank you so much for listening.